All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of Leadership Fitness Camp. And the topic of today's Leadership Fitness Camp is the leader as powerful communicator. Strap yourselves in. We've got about 15 or 20 minutes worth of really dynamic insights to help you accomplish this objective for today's camp, and that is to understand and practice powerful ways of getting on the same page and moving forward. And as usual, I have three sort of key techniques that I'm going to share with you today, and here's the first. And it really talks about this concept of having macro versus micro conversations. And I use this exercise as an example. And so if you think about town planning and essentially creating a new subdivision here in Oakville, for example, where I live, there's a great deal of new building going on. There's new residential areas and schools and parks and churches and things of that nature, shopping and what have you. And so all of that takes time to plan. All of that requires a great deal of planning and a lot of logistical work before people actually move in, businesses are thriving, and so forth. And so what happens is it starts at the very top of this page. So for example, the town planners get together and they plan anywhere from 2 to 5 years out. And they've got a vision and they start drawing lines on papers and essentially identify where they're going to have things like, green space and, low density residential and high density residential for more affordability and shopping and schools and what have you. And then once they've gone through their planning process, they hand it down to developers. And the developers plan about 1 to 2 years out. And so they look at developing specific plots of the land that's there. So this is yours, develop it. Developers then hire contractors, and contractors have a smaller window of operation where they work on essentially a 1-year time horizon, and they look at how they can essentially build what they're going to build in that 1-year time period. And they hire tradespeople, and tradespeople work with an even smaller time horizon, and that is they get hired for plumbing or electrical or laying foundation or whatever they've been hired to do. And they have a shorter term time horizon where they have to finish this particular job now. So as you can see, the nature of conversations that take place and activity that takes place can happen at any one of these 4 levels. Anywhere from a very high level of sort of, very much designing how we look at stuff, to developing how we're going to develop something, coordinating its actions, and then effectively implementing it. So whether you're a manager, as an example, and you are working at the developer stage where you are dealing with a 1 to 2 year time horizon, or whether you're a first line performer in your organization where essentially it's all about the here and now, then you know that other people may not be in that same sort of time frame of macro or to micro. That allows them to be speaking the same language as you. Knowing the language they're speaking and being able to communicate and coordinate that you are speaking at the same platform. When I interact with CEOs, much of the conversation takes place at the 4th level, that design level. Not all of it, but much of it. And then occasionally we swoop down into like levels 3, 2, and 1 to talk about tactical implementation. When we're talking to salespeople on the road, it's very much about what does it take to hit your numbers now. And so we don't talk about sort of strategic implications and competitive influences and how innovation is going to affect us 2 or 3 or 5 years down the road. We talk about how do we hit our numbers now. So you get the sense of kind of how that macro versus micro allows us to get on that same page. That's the first part of our camp here today, dealing with leader as powerful communicator. The second part deals with this thing called questioning. And so, when we talk about being a powerful communicator, this isn't really about how well I can articulate an idea, which is not a bad skill, by the way, but really all about how to get the best out of the other person so that we are communicating effectively through understanding the other person and then, of course, sharing our own idea. So I want to talk about this concept of powerful questioning. And this is designed to reveal crucial information. Firstly, it confirms you've heard them, and it's really an expression of curiosity. This is us at our best when we were little, asking questions just to understand stuff. And the understanding isn't just so that we understand stuff that the other people are saying, but really to evoke new insights in the other person about what they may not have been thinking about until you ask that question. And it does take some courage to ask uncomfortable questions. You'll notice I didn't use the word difficult questions or tough questions in that particular sentence, that point, deliberately. because if they're difficult and if they're tough, then they are. But if they're uncomfortable, well, that's just a state of being. We can all move past our discomfort. But it does take courage to ask some of those uncomfortable questions, or to perhaps ask, what's the smelly elephant in the room? Because there seems to be one. And takes courage to ask that question sometimes when you feel yourself in an environment where you're interacting with others and it just doesn't feel right. There's something going on. Just to ask, what's the smelly elephant that's in this room? Open-ended questions work best. Closed-ended questions, quite honestly, really just get you to a point where you're gathering facts. And facts are not bad. They're just not necessarily opinions. They're not exactly insights. They're not. You get where I'm going with this. So open-ended questions gives you access to insights as opposed to merely facts. Questions that are designed to move the dialogue forward as opposed to ruminating over what happened, why it happened, and who's at fault is pretty much not really, of any value, quite honestly. Although reflection questions are very powerful, this is about moving the dialogue forward. Be aware of why. Why is a great question and a really poor question all at the same time. Because, using a why question will unpack and, if you will, peel back the layers of the onion to find more stuff out. But it will also put the other person potentially on the defensive if you're challenging them on why, as opposed to challenging why it happens. And then lastly, beware of judgment, because in your questioning, you want to be in a position where it's neutral and considered objective, as opposed to you are judging the other person for whatever the case might be. And that's on page 38, by the way, in your workbook if you're following along. And I've got several slides that I want to walk you through now in a slightly different way. And here's the first one, and it's about powerful questions. These are examples of powerful questions on this topic area of reflecting and reviewing. I'm now going to ask you to pause this recording and just read this on your own. Read this on your own and then select the one question that pops out for you as being a really interesting question. Just select one that just jumps out at you and then write it down. All right? Pause now and then hit the play button again when you're ready. Okay, welcome back. Thank you for that. Have you written down the one question that kind of jumps out at you? Terrific. Let's go to the next group of powerful questions, and they deal with how we work together. How we work together. And these questions are example questions that you might pose of another person on how we work together. I'm going to ask you to go through the exact same exercise. Please pause this recording, read through this, and then write down the question you feel really jumps out at you as being the question you like and maybe you even can use. Pause the recording now and come back when you're ready. Welcome back. Did you get a chance to read through this and then write down one question that's really important for you? Terrific. I'm going to do this a couple more times and then I'll tell you where this is all going. The next group of powerful questions deals with the here and the now. And this is all about how we're doing what we're doing, how are we tracking our goals, what's working to get you this far, and so forth. Here are a list of sample questions. I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Pause this recording, read this, and write down the question that jumps out for you. Just one. Pause the recording now. All right, welcome back. Did you get a chance to read through this and write down the one question that jumped out for you? If you did, terrific. You now have at least 3 questions written down that really resonate with you, and that's powerful. The final one is this group of questions about how we move forward. Like what the 2 biggest challenges are that you might facing, or what's possible, what's exciting about that. So you'll notice those are forward-moving questions. Same exercise. I'm going to ask you to pause the recording, read through this, and write down the one question that really jumps out at you. Okay, please, and then come back after you've done that. Pause the recording now, please. Okay, welcome back. Thank you for that. I'm glad you did that. You now have, if you followed along through this exercise, you've written down 4 powerful questions, one from each of these groupings that stood out for you. Well, the reason I asked you to do that is because those stood out for you, which means you could probably feel comfortable using those questions. And the exercise I'm going to ask you to do over the next little while is to actually use those questions deliberately on a variety of conversations with a variety of people. Just use them, whether you choose to use them before you're actually in the meeting with someone or whether you do it spontaneously. I leave it entirely up to you, but practice using those. Use them several times at least. In fact, the more often you use them, the more success you're going to have with them, the more you're going to find out about them, and that's your exercise, and I'd love to hear about how that works for you when you've gone through it. And that was the second part of our camp here today. The third part of our camp, as we go to the last topic, deals with this topic. And we've all been there, right? These two people are having what's generally known as an argument. Actually, they're not having an argument. They're having a fight. There's just no physical fighting. Because the word argument, you see, comes from the Greek. There's your lesson in Greek for the day. And really, the definition of argument, as the Greeks defined it, is the sharing of information so that both parties benefit. Well, these two don't seem to be sharing information for the benefit of each other, do they? So let's just call it a conflict or a confrontation or maybe even a fight. But we're going to talk about this thing where it looks like the two parties are not on the same page. And here's what happens when we're not on the same page. There's a variety of reasons, and the principal reason why we're not on the same page is because we're misaligned. Obviously, not on the same page. We're misaligned on things like facts or conclusions or assumptions or actions. Essentially, stuff. We're misaligned on stuff that's being said or stuff that's being done. And, as the picture or the image illustrates, what'd you say, but what'd you mean? And so I have 3 examples here. If I were to say to you, we have a great culture here, you might be thinking, okay, what does that mean? What does a great culture mean? What does a great culture look like? If you were a candidate and I was interviewing you for a job and I said we have a great culture here, what the heck does that mean? We're not aligned yet. You might think one thing. I may be thinking great culture because it's very competitive. You might be thinking great culture because it's very collaborative. Well, those are 2 different C's. Second example is I need you to make this right. Something's gone wrong with a customer or a situation, whatever, and I say, I need you to make this right. Well, what does making it right look like? What's it going to look like? What's it going to be when it's right? So we can easily misalign on things like that. Well, let's collaborate better. Yeah, we both have agreed that we want to collaborate better. Terrific. What does that look like? What does that even mean? And so it's really easy to get misaligned on facts, conclusions, assumptions, and actions because people say these kinds of things all the time, and other people go away wondering what that means. So I had an example recently where I was in a sales meeting, and the president of the company was asked by one of the salespeople, "Are we still selling? Do you want us to still sell product X?" And the president responded, "We won't turn away any orders." And then the topic moved on. I paused the conversation and I said, "Excuse me, what did you guys all hear when the president said we won't turn away any orders? Did he say we are selling product X or we're not selling product X?" What did he say? Half the room thought he said, "Yes, please continue selling product X." And the other half of the room thought he said, "No, don't bother selling product X, but we will take orders, we'll accept orders if somebody should happen to need it." And so but nobody stopped it until I stopped it to say, okay, what did you guys actually hear when he said that? So it's really easy to get misaligned on facts and conclusions and actions and what people say. The other area and now let's get a little deeper. The other areas where we can get very misaligned is on this area of beliefs. And we've talked about beliefs before, and you understand the principles of belief. I love this quote in the top left here. A belief is not merely an idea that the mind possesses. It's an idea that possesses the mind, and it is absolutely true. So this is not just, a question of I believe that, people are, basically trying to do their best. Well, if I believe something different, like, people are just here to take advantage of the situation, then, it doesn't matter how much you argue otherwise, because that idea possesses my mind. Ideas, those beliefs, they become truths in our minds, but they're not truths, they're just beliefs. But we cling to them like belongings, like they actually are truths. Beliefs lead to behaviors, and behaviors lead to results, whatever those results happen to be. So if we have misalignment on beliefs, so for example, if I believe in um, doing the right thing, and that's a very strong belief for me, but you believe in fairness, we might be in conflict between our beliefs, because doing the right thing might be giving the customer, a huge discount because, we've not been doing things kind of the way the expectations were designed. But because your belief might be that, it's about fairness, then, if the customer gets far too much and we get far not enough, then that's just not fair. And so there's a misalignment on beliefs. We may be arguing about whether we should actually do this or not do this, when in fact the real argument is around, can we reconcile our beliefs? So I'm going to ask you to consider this exercise as a reflection exercise moving forward after this is all over. In conflicts, when you find yourself in conflicts with others, disagreements, what have you, what beliefs serve you well and which don't? I'd ask you to write that down and reflect on that over the course of the next little while. There are also misalignment on values. Roy Disney said, it's not hard to make decisions once you know what your values are. Well, that is very true, which is why we've done so much work already in leadership fitness camps on values, and it's in your workbook again. So go back to your values, because those values are important for you to know. Take a look at that new quote that I put at the top left-hand corner. If you don't stick to your values, when they're being tested, they're not values, they're hobbies. And so, if I value honesty, and you value performance, and, I'm arguing for the fact that we need to come clean with a customer, and you're arguing for the fact that, no, we shouldn't be doing that, because if we do that, we're not going to hit our numbers. What are we arguing? We're arguing values. We just don't know it yet. And so that's how we get into this conflict around getting misaligned on values. And so know that these are ways of getting misaligned on stuff, but it takes time to spot that we're not just misaligned on facts or conclusions, but in fact on things like values or beliefs. Oh, how about this one? Ego. This is one of my favorite little words. I is the smallest word in the dictionary. By the way, anybody here on this call have an ego? Yeah, well, congratulations. That would make you human. Don't make it the biggest in your vocabulary. Absolutely true. Here's another one. It's the only requirement to destroy any relationship. And boy, is that ever true. And so the advice, quite simply, be a bigger person, skip the E, let it go. And it's so very true. Ego does get us into a lot of trouble because, I don't want to admit I was wrong. I don't want to accept responsibility. My ego's fragile, whatever the case might be. This is a big deal, by the way. Ego is, nobody talks about it in business. Leadership. No, it's about strategy and all that. Nah, forget it. Strategy's nice. This is reality. Stuff like ego, beliefs, values. Those are reality. Deal with those. Strategy will happen, no problem. I like this third piece here. Dear ego, I'm breaking up with you. No more circular discussions. No more 11th hour incriminations. And it's kind of interesting is to have this relationship where you can tell your ego to kind of, park it for a while and get over it. And lastly, this concept of apologizing. It does not always mean that you're wrong and the other person. In fact, it doesn't have to mean you're wrong. It could just mean that you value your relationship more than your ego. Hey, I apologize for making you feel that way. I apologize for the fact that what I did upset you and caused you all these problems. It doesn't mean that I was wrong. It just means I'm apologizing, and I'm genuinely apologizing. And I value our relationship and how you come out of this thing more than how I feel about me. Oh boy. Last one. Oh yeah, our favorite, the F word, misalignment on fear. So if you live in fear with the future, of the future because of what happened in your past, you'll end up losing what you have in the present. You know, fear is a kind of a real emotion because it is. I mean, we live in it, right? But it dominates, and nobody ever talks about in a business setting about how I'm afraid about this and afraid about that. Nobody uses the F word in business. They use anxious, concerned, uncertain, skeptical. Cut it out. Most of the times, those are just disguised words for fear. I'm afraid. I'm afraid this isn't going to work and it's going to cost us or me my job, my role, my pride, my ego, my security, my whatever the heck it might happen to be. You know, and there are many types of fear. Fear of failure. You know, my God, I might fail. I might be judged. I might succeed. Am I worthy? Fear of speaking. What if people laugh at me? You know, fear of not being able to make a living, fear of rejection. Oh my God, is that a powerful one? Fear of losing everything. And the ever popular one that isn't on here, metathesiophobia. That's your second lesson in Greek for the day. And that is the fear of change. And so those are the three topics I wanted you to, and I leave you with this exercise for you to think about. And that is, what are you afraid of? And so, oh, and there's one more. Sorry, I've forgotten. And so there's misalignment because of things like fatigue and stress, you know, jet lag, trauma is another one. You know, when there's traumatic events in our lives that just throw us off our game. It's called life, right? And we're just not at our best, and we're just not connecting with people in a way that's particularly constructive and effective. So those are the kinds of things that happen simply because stuff happens to our bodies and our minds. And it's called fatigue or stress or jet lag or trauma. You know, like if so, just ask anybody who's lost a loved one. Oh yeah, they're really on their game. Ask anyone who's dealing with a very sick parent or a very sick family member. Oh yeah, they're really on the top of their game. You know, so you know, ask anybody who's just lost their job. Oh yeah, I'm top of the world. I'm totally connecting with people. Are you kidding me? It's really difficult because it's a physiological impact, and it affects us. And so I leave you with your action plan, last couple of slides, and then on your way. What's different now, what you will do next, and you have some homework assignment. Those exercises that I pointed out, you know, about what are you afraid of and which beliefs, you know, work for you to get through misalignment, and certainly the most important one, which is you know, writing down those 4 questions that I'm hoping you lifted off those powerful question lists and you actually apply it. And then tell 3 friends and an accountability partner, and you're more likely to actually follow through with it. Complete the micro exercise on page 32. I think you'll find that valuable, and the questioning exercise on page 38. Although if you just practice what I suggested, those practice questions, and anything else that you want to add to your list of things you wish to do, you're most encouraged to do so. And so I'll leave you with this final thought on this topic, and that is, if you leave room for interpretation, it will get taken. Thank you all. That's it for now. Have a great day.